Hey everybody, Paul and Matt here, and today we are talking about taxes in Gibraltar and maybe a quick comparison between those paid in the UK. Maybe we'll find out today which are less, but I think I know the answer. So Paul, if you can just start it off because it's I think it's one of the first things people ask us when they're considering moving to Gibraltar from the UK. So taxes in Gibraltar, can you give us a kind of brief summary of the benefits, I guess?
Thank you, Matt. I mean, the common mistake is that the assumption or misconception that Gibraltar is completely tax-free. As you know, that is not the case. Um, However, it remains a very tax-efficient jurisdiction and a very attractive destination for relocation planning for UK nationals. Yes, I'd be happy to cover broadly what the differences are. In the UK, the income tax rate, I think, is on an escalating scale, and I think the lowest tier is 20, and it peaks at 45. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
20, 40, 45. There's some caveats. You have the
Yeah,
personal allowance. Also, if
correct.
you go over 100 grand, then you start to lose the personal allowance. So you have like really a rate of about 60% around that 100 to 125. But yeah, 40, 45 at the higher rates.
Exactly. So that's what you pay. Whereas in Gibraltar, the rate, again, it's a progressive tax rate system similar to the UK, but it starts really low with a lot of allowances. There's two tax systems, one which is an allowance based and another one for higher earners with a gross income based system. But it starts from zero and then peaks at 27, 28, and it has the bell curve effect that it comes down, and the average rate for higher rate taxpayers is 25. Am I right? So
Correct, yeah.
there's quite a difference in income tax rates between the UK and Gibraltar. So you're making assuming that we're talking about a higher taxpayer, the differential is something in the region of 20% or just shy of 20. Let's
Yeah.
call it 17, 18. I mean, that can make a significant difference in terms of your net disposable income. So yeah, income tax is a big plus for any Brit looking to relocate. Then wealth tax, none applies. We are an Anglo-Saxon jurisdiction. It's less common in an Anglo-Saxon jurisdiction than it is in Napoleonic law countries where wealth tax is more commonplace. So no wealth tax in either. Inheritance tax, massive difference. UK, you pay anywhere between 0 and 40, but once you exceed the nil rate band, whether the nil rate band is for a married couple 650, or if you include the main residence, it could go up to 1 million, with a few caveats that your net worth is not more than 2 and then 3, because then it starts um, reducing the primary residence allowance. But let's assume that we're talking about someone with um, a total nil rate band of 1 million, then you're paying 40% on the excess. Whereas in Gibraltar, there's no inheritance tax whatsoever. So that is I would say, a big plus and a big attraction for any UK national looking to move to this wonderful part of the world. But of course, um, there's been a seismic shift in UK inheritance tax in the autumn 2024 budget, where they've transitioned from a domicile based to a residency based IHT regime. So it's clearer now, but for the first 10 years, you remain UK tax liable to UK tax on UK inheritance tax for 10 whole years after leaving, which you can mitigate through insurance, or unless, of course, you come from a third country and you've been outside the UK for more than 10, in which case you have no exposure whatsoever. So, yep, I think income tax, big plus. Inheritance tax is a big plus. And then capital gains, again, massive. I think the UK has a capital gains tax regime. Does it start at 10 and peak at 20 something, or?
I think they've gone up, and it depends if it's property or investments, but it can go up to like 28, I think
Yeah,
and it's ever increasing as we've seen.
it's ever increasing, and it depends on your net worth and the asset types you hold. But look, the bottom line is it can go up to, yeah, it's 2028. So it can go up to 28. In Gibraltar, there's no capital gains tax, so it's very attractive for anyone looking to dispose of either investment holdings, and by that I mean stocks, shares, mutual funds, even crypto, I would imagine, or any other asset which is not UK citus assets. If you have a UK property, you're subject to UK capital gains tax, with the caveat that only the gain in property value from the 6th of April 2015, which is when the UK budget introduced this change. Prior to April 2015, if you were non-resident, there was no capital gains tax on UK cited assets, but that changed. But no, a massive, or if you have, Matt, a UK business you want to dispose of, and you intend to stay in Gibraltar for 5 complete tax years or more, then you move and you can dispose of your business without being liable to capital gains. So we've mentioned income tax, inheritance, and capital gains tax as being big pluses. Then we've got VAT, 20% standard rate in the UK, none in Gibraltar. Um, so again, quite attractive from that perspective. Corporate tax rate. I think the UK initially aimed to reduce their corporate tax rates, but then, of course, they've had such massive budget deficits, they've gone back on their timeline in terms of bringing corporate tax down. But correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but I think it's anywhere between 19 and 25. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, yeah,
Broadly.
yeah.
And in Gibraltar, the corporate tax rate to meet the G20, standards of minimum corporate tax, I think it's just been increased from 12.5 to 15, but still a massive advantage if you re-domicile a UK company to Gibraltar. And then we've got dividend tax, which in the UK again ranges between 0 and 39.5 or something.
The additional rate is 39 and 39.35, I think it is. Yeah, yeah,
0.35. So I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I think quite a lot to pay in dividend tax. And in Gibraltar, dividend tax from a recognized stock exchange, sorry, dividends paid from a recognized stock exchange does not attract any tax to begin with. And then if you have a Gibraltar company, the way it works, the dividend tax is very low because dividend tax is 20, but you get credit tax relief for the corporate tax paid by the entity. So I'll give you an example. The dividend tax is 20, but you have a business in Gibraltar that's paid tax at 15%. That's a standard rate. So then the shareholders only pay 5% because they've already suffered 15% tax. It's not as if you add it on. You pay your corporate tax, and then on top of that you pay dividend tax of 20. So you're paying effectively 35. That's not the case. You're getting the tax relief. And I think in the UK they're two separate matters. Am I right? Am I wrong? Or
Yeah, yeah, the corporation is taxed, and then as an individual, you extract the dividends from that, and that's your personal taxation, regardless of what's gone on before. Yeah.
exactly. So this is you're only paying the true rate of tax for a shareholder on a Gibraltar entity is only 5%, which is incredible, really, if you come to think of it. So the advantages are quite significant. So whilst it is not entirely tax-free, I think we've identified 4 or 5 areas where you stand to gain quite a fair bit by relocating, besides lifestyle and safety, um, you know, healthcare, access to EU because the treaty is about to be implemented on the 10th of April. So unfettered access to the Schengen area. Um, yeah, there's massive advantage, but there's another one as well, Matt, that I failed to mention, and I don't know whether this new, because there's two things. First is the treaty implementation, which is scheduled for the 10th of April, which is when they implement the border, the really tough border controls that across Schengen, I think EU, they're introducing these biometric electronic system of entry and exit. Um, but um, we talk about, when we talk about dividend tax, I mean the other thing to consider is that if you have and with a caveat again that we don't know how the tax rules will change because they will change once um, Gibraltar residency reopens for anyone looking to relocate. As you know, Matt, has been tentatively penciled in for next week. Whether that happens or not, it remains to be seen. But I think you mentioned that they were now close to having reviewed the eligibility criteria, and I would imagine it impacts access to services. Well, we don't know whether there's going to be additional tax to pay to gain tax residency, and I would imagine that may well be the case, or whether you have to pay money into a sovereign wealth fund or some kind of that there might be something in that regard. We do not
Time
know.
will tell. Who knows?
Time
They've
will
been
tell.
quite tight-lipped about it,
Cagey,
but
they're
yeah, people
cagey.
should watch this space to find out more in the next couple of weeks.
Correct. But what I would say about dividend tax right now, as things stand now, if you have a UK entity, because of the double taxation treaty between the UK and Gibraltar, if you have a UK entity that pays you a dividend, as things stand now, in theory, you don't pay any tax in Gibraltar for any dividend from a UK entity. So that is another big
Yeah,
plus for, entrepreneurial people who are planning to relocate, um, but they want to retain their UK business and be paid through dividends.
yeah. For
As
me, that's
things
a
stand now,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
massive.
For me, that's an amazing one, and you know, it has to be structured and looked at properly in the advice. But what we can say for absolute certain is that we have clients who we held gain residency who are doing just that now. They take
Yeah.
their dividends. They're not UK tax resident anymore. They're not paying dividend tax in there. And it's tax free in Gibraltar. No, that's really good, Paul. I think one thing I said, you mentioned a lot of the other incentives to relocate to Gibraltar: lifestyle, healthcare, property, the treaty. We've got a video on every single one of those, so people should subscribe. That's a good reason to do so. And I think the one thing that we haven't mentioned that we shouldn't go into detail today, because again we have videos on these, is we talked about general taxation, but there's also specialist tax schemes like the HEPSS scheme and the Cat 2 scheme, which is for high net worth individuals, a very interesting scheme. And we've got a video on Cat 2 which will follow this one, so people should stay online to watch that. So any final thoughts, Paul?
No, all I would say is once the gates reopen for residency, and we know that because it was closed because there were like 860 applications or whatever ridiculous number of Brits wanting to move to Gibraltar. I think once the floodgates open again, we're going to be flooded with requests for Gibraltar residency, and it is strongly advisable that those who are seriously considering moving to Gibraltar from the UK make contact with you, Matt, with the office, and engage with us because the ministries involved have limited capacity, and everyone will be knocking on the door wanting to be have their residency certificate issued, and it already takes quite a while. There'll be new eligibility criteria, which is going to slow it down. Um, and yeah, it's on a first come, first served basis. So give us a call. We can sort them
Definitely.
out. And it's not just about getting that elusive residency certificate, it's about all the tax planning, relocation planning, tax planning that goes around moving to a new country.
Sounds good. So listen to Paul, people watching, get in touch. And I agree completely. I mean, the number of inquiries we've been receiving, we do have a waiting list of people, and, we have to prioritize those who are going to engage with us and pay for our services. But there will be a lot of demand, and I think it's going to be a lot more difficult to kind of navigate that as an individual, and that's where we are here to help people. So that's great. Thank you for that one, Paul.
Thank you.
Taxes, always an exciting subject, but I think it is exciting when it comes to Gibraltar. So everyone watching, as always, subscribe, share, like, comment on our videos, watch the next one, which will be category 2 in Gibraltar, and we'll speak to some of you soon. Goodbye.